Hi, and a warm welcome to all of you who are joining us this evening from wherever you are. My name is Gladys, and this webinar is hosted by Dublin West Community Church. Some of you may have come across us already on meetup.com or Facebook. This is now the fourth in a series entitled A Life Worth Living, in which we aim to explore and sometimes challenge present-day cultural views on what it means to live meaningful and flourishing lives. Tonight, our topic under this heading is Christmas still relevant today? I think you'll understand it's been chosen for obvious reasons. But before we start, let me explain the format of the evening so that you know what to expect. First, there'll be a short talk on the subject. Then we've got two people who will share personal stories on how Christmas has impacted their lives. And then we've got a Q&A panel, and this is where you all come in. And I can put any questions or comments that you have to the panel. Some questions have already come in, which is great. But if any of you have any more as you're listening throughout the evening, as someone is speaking or whatever, then just type them into Facebook or email them to the address shown below. Okay, we're going to start with the talk, and it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Fraser Hosford. He's a part-time economist as well as a leader within the church. And before I hand you over to him, don't forget, keep your questions coming in. Over to you, Fraser.
Well, thank you very much, Gladys, and good evening, everyone. I was going to say nice to see you, but I can't quite do that in this virtual world that we're now in. But nice to know that you're there, and hope you enjoy our topic this evening. Is Christmas still relevant? That is our question. So as we come to celebrate Christmas, and we're getting pretty close now, we're less than 3 weeks away, which may scare you a little. Does the history, the origins, the underlying Christian message, does that really have any relevance? Does that have anything left to say to us today? See, the first Christmas split time in two. It's now roughly 2021 years since the birth of Jesus. But does that still matter today for how we celebrate it? I mean, I'm pretty sure most of us enjoy Christmas. We enjoy the fun and receiving presents and giving presents. We enjoy the food and the drink and getting together with friends. We enjoy all of that. But, you know, we'd happily keep, but what about the God stuff and the faith stuff? Is that still relevant? Because for more and more people in today's world, I think the answer might be no. There is this view that the Christian faith, that God is irrelevant or obsolete or out of date. That is the question that we're going to try and deal with. And there's a couple of charges, a couple of reasons people think that. I think one of them is that religion is about belief in a different world, in the next world, the world that is yet to come. And because of that, it doesn't really have that much to say to this world. I mean, if you don't believe in the next world, then what does it have to say to this world? What relevance does it have to your normal life? Or even when you do talk about this life, religion and faith seems to be about just particular parts of this life, about the religious life, about things like church and religious services, only certain parts of life. It doesn't really speak to our everyday life and all that's going on. So that again limits its relevance. And anyway, you know, religion is about ultimately telling us what to do. It's restrictive. It takes away our freedom, and that's not really the type of Christmas present that any of us want. So I know from conversations that that's some of the things that people think, particularly at this time of year. So I'd love to try and speak into or look at some of those charges if I can this evening. So the first one is this sense that the Christian faith is otherworldly. And it is true that the Christians do believe in another world, that we believe that what we see in this world is not all that there is. That is true. But it doesn't in any way devalue our view of this world. And we still believe that this world is very important. And actually, the irony is that the message of Christmas, when we come to this time of the year, is that we are celebrating the entry of God into this particular world. So it does matter. That is the true meaning of Christmas. When we celebrate the birth of the baby Jesus, it is an amazement that the Creator God, So for people like me, we believe that this God made this world and sustains this world. And at Christmas, we are remembering that this creator entered into his creation and took on the form of one of his creatures. He took on human flesh like mine. He took on flesh and blood. He's a human being. It wasn't a trick of any sort, some magic trick or fancy dress. It's the extraordinary event that a personal God changed the very form of his existence so that he could be close to the people that he made. And we believe to help restore the people that he made. So actually, Christmas shows us that faith is about this world. Despite all the challenges and imperfections of our world, and we know there are many, the Christian faith, the Christian God really values this world, so much so that he entered into it. And as the Christian story continues, the importance of our human world and our human existence continues in the story. After his resurrection, Jesus went back up to heaven, still in a human body, still as a human being. And the end goal of the Christian story is not just that we get to leave this world and go up to heaven, but that actually heaven will come down to us. And this world in which we live now, which we can look around and see, will itself be renewed and restored in its fullness. So ultimately, the faith is about this world, not some other world. Okay, but what about that other charge, that faith is really just about a certain part of life, this religious part of life? It's my view that one of the worst things the church has done to Jesus is to make Jesus religious. That faith for so many people has been reduced to church and to Sundays and services. It's been reduced to Christmas and to Easter and to just a certain limited part of our lives. You see, when God became a human being in Jesus at Christmas, he entered into real life. God lived in this world on Mondays through to Saturdays, not just on Sundays. And as Jesus, he lived through all the different phases of life. He grew up week by week, year by year, through life. As a child, he learnt and he played. As a teenager, he began to sort of find out his own identity and his own place in the world, begin to wonder who was he. As a young adult, he would have, started working and began to sort of plot out a career for himself. He did all these things before he took on any specific religious role as a preacher. It was real life. And in real life, as he went through all these phases, he would have experienced the ups and downs of our world. Jesus' lineage that we remember in the stories of Christmas is that he was born into an oppressed people who lived under the Roman Empire. And because of that, because of those people, and in that particular moment, because of a Roman census, he had to be born away from his family home. So that meant that his grandparents and his aunts and uncles couldn't get to be with him and to hold him when he was a newborn baby. He was also homeless because of that in those first days, living in emergency accommodation in Bethlehem. And then later on, he had to live as a refugee, fleeing persecution, and they left and fled to Egypt. Real life, hardships. And throughout his life, he experienced injustice, he experienced bereavement, he experienced rejection. He went through stages of failure and disappointments. His own family didn't get who he was and what he was about. At one stage, they tried to take him away out of a place where he was teaching people and doing his ministry, saying that they thought he was mad. And then, his ministry, the very thing that he was his main focus in life, that he spent his time on, went through all these up and downs. And it seemed to fail and falter at different times. People turned away and left him, looking for an easier alternative, thinking that his teaching was hard. And those that did stay and stayed for maybe a full 3 years, his closest disciples, who he really poured his life into over years, they fled at the end of his life. It was real life. And God himself, the very person of God, when he entered in as Jesus to this world, experienced these real things. Let me give you an example. One of my favorite actors, and I think it's pretty clear that he's one of the best actors of all time, maybe the best Irish actor of all time, Daniel Day-Lewis. He won 3 Oscars, the only person, I believe, to have won 3 Oscars in the category of Best Actor. And Day-Lewis is known for his style of acting. His style of acting is known as method acting. So when he was acting, he wouldn't actually act out this character. Rather, he became this character. He just entered in to their personhood. So one of his earlier films was In the Name of the Father. And in that film, he lived in a prison cell for 2 days without food or water. So that he actually became a prisoner under solitary confinement. One of his first Oscars, I think, was My Left Foot, the story of Christy Brown, the writer and painter with cerebral palsy. And as part of his training for that, Day-Lewis spent 8 weeks at a clinic in Dublin. For those 8 weeks, he stayed in character at all times. He stayed in his wheelchair at all times. He was lifted in and out of the car by members of the crew. He was fed by members of the crew. This is an extraordinary story of acting. And then in my favorite film, The Last of the Mohicans, it's a historical film. I hope you know it, set in the 1750s in the French and Indian War in North America. And he was Hawkeye. As Hawkeye, Day-Lewis learned to track and skin animals. He actually did this. He learned this. Tracking and skinning animals. He built canoes. He learned to fight with tomahawks. And he learned to fire and reload a 12-pound rifle on the run. When he was filming, he carried his gun with him everywhere, including to his family lunch on Christmas Day. To the extent that after the filming was finished, he suffered from hallucinations and claustrophobia. And afterwards, he said this in an article: "I have no idea how not to be Hawkeye." Isn't that extraordinary? You see, Daniel Day-Lewis actually became Jerry Conlon. He became Christy Brown, and he became Hawkeye. And what Christmas tells us is that God actually became a human being. It's not just something we talk about. He actually became a person and entered into and experienced life in our world. Life like us, life like we do. Okay, but so what? That's maybe a nice story, but so what? How is that still relevant for us today? Well, let me offer 2 quick suggestions. I want to say that if God has experienced life like us, then it means that God can actually relate to us, and also that God can help us. So God entered into our world. That means God came to us because he wants to be with us. And in the life of Jesus, God has displayed what a relationship with God, a friendship with God can actually look like. With the disciples, he ate with them, he drank with them, he taught them, he talked to them, he walked with them, he worked with them, he joked with them. It was just a normal relationship. It was a normal person-to-person, human-to-human relationship. And that is modeling for us what a relationship with God can look like every day and 7 days a week. Furthermore, we see that Jesus welcomed all sorts of people into this type of relationship. People who were marginalized, people who were on the fringe, people who were poor, people who were sinners. People who society at the time deemed as second class because of some part of who they were. At that time, it was women, lepers, Gentiles, all welcomed in by Jesus. And I believe it's still the heart of Jesus to welcome people in to that relationship with him today. And in this relationship, because God has experienced life, he can now fully relate to his people. He's not some cold, aloof deity, distant, demanding, emotionally distant. That's not who God is. God has experienced what we experience. He has been through what we've been through. So he knows it on the inside. And unfortunately, he's got the scars to prove it. It's the difference between empathy and sympathy. I think we probably know that when we've gone through our own struggles and we're talking to people, when people can actually relate from their shared experience, that brings such value to us. And when we walk through those days, those darker days of life, I know that we all, at those times, need someone who will stick by us, someone who will listen to us, and someone who will be willing to share, not some textbook advice or what they think might help, but something that helped them when they went through those dark days. Because God entered this world, God can be that person. God wants to be that person to us. But I also believe that God can help us. Now, especially now that he's become a human being, God can help us. Now, I think we probably need to do a little bit of rethinking on this. This is an area where we have misconceptions. And you know, maybe that's just the nature of our history as a people. But I know for some, we see faith as conservative, as backward, as religious people, as people who want to tell us what to do, exert authority, and that church is all about morality. But that is not who Jesus was. And that's not what we celebrate at Christmas. You see, when God entered our world and became a human being in Jesus, he didn't just go around giving orders and telling people what to do. Yes, he gave teaching, but his teaching was advice on how to live life, on how to have a good, full, flourishing life. And that was rooted out of the life that he had led, the up and downs of human life, an ordinary human life in our broken world. And I think we need that teaching today. We still do. And I know we hate the thought of some external person or authority coming and telling us what to do and being restrictive towards us. But that's not what this is. And what we still need is some philosophy of life to guide our choices, because we're presented with a myriad of choices every day. And Jesus provided good guidance. He gave guidance to his followers on how to form long-lasting, healthy relationships, how to handle conflict, what to do with money, what true success looked like, advice on being a parent, being a family member, how to fight for justice, really how to live a full and flourishing life. You see, Jesus didn't just become a human being. Jesus is the true human being. He has shown us and modeled for us what a human life can actually look like, what are the stages that it can reach. And as the Christian story continues, we move from Christmas to Easter. Jesus offers us power and the ability to change and live that life, as well as giving us the demonstration and the modeling of what it is. You see, I think all of us experience that gnawing power that holds us back in life, a selfishness maybe, a self-absorption that sort of holds us back. And in his death and resurrection, Jesus defeated that, and he opened up a new life for us that we can enter into and live. So yeah, I believe that Christmas is still relevant today. I believe that the struggles of our lives, our ordinary human lives, are largely the same struggles. I mean, they look different day to day, but underneath they're the same struggles that were there centuries and even millennia ago. The struggles that Jesus himself faced. And I think that because of that, because Jesus actually faced them, he can offer us relationship and he can offer us transformation, all because of Christmas, that Jesus entered into this world. So thank you for listening.
Thanks for that, Fraser. There's plenty to think through on that. Okay, we're now just going to go and hear a couple of personal stories. First up is Helen Zeki. She's a mother of 3 who has been in Ireland for the past 15 years. She works in the third sector as an accountant. Helen, over to you.
Thank you very much, Gladys, for the warm introduction, and good evening, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here to use this time to share my own personal stories of what Christmas actually means to me. I'm sure you would all agree with me, depending on who you're speaking to, that Christmas season can be a time of mixed emotion. I want to believe that for most, this is a time when hope, joy, generosity, and extra passion is infused. I have two distinctive stories that I would like to use to express and convey what Christmas actually means to me. My first story would be growing up as a young child. I remember those days. I really, really loved Christmas because Christmas was one of the time when I am guaranteed a new dress, not just a new dress that I have chosen. And I look forward to Christmas Day, having that dress on and going into church. But not only that, I look forward to the Christmas meal with about 20 or more of my family members, relatives. I'm sure in our today's world, that would not be acceptable. Nevertheless, it was a joyful time. And after the meal, I am absolutely guaranteed a limitless playtime. I get to play with relatives, with friends, and with neighbors. And even thinking of it now as an adult, I think most of my longing for community, for family, is rooted from those experiences that I carry. While I am not living in my place of birth now, I think my longing to want to connect, to be part of a community, to want to reach out to families, to want to have friends and neighbors around, and especially at this time of Christmas, I think it's rooted to those times, to want to share, to want to make sure that, you spread that love, the compassion, the extra compassion. And what a great time. Christmas poses that time because it's one time of the year where we kind of stop on a track. I'll leave that there. My second memory that I'd like to share is one of the later years as a mother and a mother of three. I think Christmas morning are the best. They are magical and beautiful. I would not trade those times when my kids were young and watching the excitement and astonishment in their face when they open their presents. Those times are priceless. They are really imprinted in my memories. I just see them and I know they know that those presents are coming from a place of love, not something they deserve or have worked hard to get. And reflecting on it, I am constantly reminded of God's love, God's pure, unconditional love for me, for everyone around, not because we've worked hard to earn it, but because He just loves us. Every year, as I celebrate Christmas, I am reminded that the generosity and gifts to mankind from God began 2021 years ago from the birth of Jesus. God devised a plan to restore myself, mankind as a whole, to Himself, to restore our joy, our hope, and to reconcile us to Him so that today I can call Him Father. It's just what a wonderful love to be part of. Every time as I celebrate Christmas, I remember that the big plan of God started with the birth of baby Jesus on that day, and knowing fully well that I am a recipient of this big plan of redemption is amazing. So yes, I love the build-up of Christmas. I really do love it. so gutted with the lockdown that we are in. I love the laughter. I love the dining, the whining, the marrying. I love the exchange of gifts. But more importantly, I make sure I never lose sight of what Christmas actually means to me. I hope these stories of mine helps to convey the actual meaning on a personal level of what Christmas means to me. And thank you all for listening.
Helen, thank you for sharing such special stories and speaking so personally. Really appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to be introducing Alan Porter next. He's a young man who's originally from India, and he moved to Ireland 4 years ago. He lives in Dublin, and would you believe he also works as an accountant? Alan, over to you.
Thank you, Gladys. And a very good evening to all of you. And as Gladys said, I'm Alan and living in Dublin, working as an accountant. For me, personally, when I think of Christmas and what it means to me, the first thing I'm reminded of is family. It is a time when we come together as a family. It is a time to renew the bondings and the friendships. It is a time when I get a chance to pause from all that I do throughout the year. And as I said, I work as an accountant, which means different responsibilities throughout the year. But this is a time when I slow down and reflect and celebrate all that God has bestowed me with. I'm involved in music, and so this season holds a special, special place in my heart with all the carols and the songs and playing music, jamming sessions with friends, and all the music and music-y bit. I just love that part of it. As Gladys said, I come from India, and India is a place of many religions and culture. So as a young kid, I remember Christmas was a time of getting presents and having a picnic and being part of a nativity. There were friends who would, from different beliefs, and they would make sure they come over to get all the Christmas treats. And my grandma would always come, give each one of us a Christmas present. My dad always had this ritual of getting me a small pet, as I used to love pets. So that meant over the years, once I had like 7 pets in a row. But now as an adult, now in my adulthood, Christmas is not just about getting presents. It's about reinforcing and confirming my belief in something which is bigger than myself. The season is a reminder of how blessed I am. As is it's a time of the year when I'm fortunate to spend time with my friends and families, to make memories, to spread the joy and the happiness which is in the air, which are far more precious than wrapped gifts under a Christmas tree for me. But most importantly, it is a time I am reminded of how loved I am, how loved each one of us are. It reminds me that, yes, there are people that love me, and there are people that might not love me, but there's a God who loves me, and he sent his son for me to give me hope and to give me life. It reminds me that in my hopelessness, God did not just leave me alone, but out of his love for me, he gave his son and made a way for me. It is a season that reminds me to be compassionate to others as God has been compassionate to me. And one of the ways that I can do this is by caring for others, for caring for people that are around me. Christ gave generously, and by giving generously to others around me, I can reflect him in my life. And so to conclude, yes, Christmas brings my family together, and being here in Ireland and my family being in different parts of the world, a lot of time that means a lot of internet calls over Christmas and all of that. But it provides a time to connect, and I enjoy that. I take the time to connect, but I always remind myself that Christmas is the season, but Jesus is the reason. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Alan. And again, really lovely to hear some personal stories from when you were young. Okay, well, we've had some questions coming in as we've been listening to Fraser, Helen and Alan. We're going to start the Q&A panel now, but please just keep some more questions coming in. We want to keep them busy, folks. Okay, the first one. Maybe this one's for you, Fraser. Let's just see. Although the other two can jump in if you want. How could God become a human being? Now, there's a good question.
Thank you, Gladys, for picking me out there. Good to start with the deep questions. How could God become a human being? Well, I can't fully answer that question, I guess. There's probably a few things to say, but I guess we have to admit to mystery. I think particularly with a question like this, and there's others like it, it's important that we admit to mystery, that we don't know everything, and we can't explain everything. I think there's an angle to that which is important for us, is that there's a problem, because if we come and judge a question like that from our own perspective as human beings, we sort of put a human knowledge and human brain power to try and answer a question which is ultimately about the divine, about God. And so we're always sort of mismatched in that. We're also biased in how we think, and we're formed by our backgrounds and all of that. So we ourselves are never going to fully be able to answer that question. And there's an issue there with us judging God from our side. I think when it comes to knowing God and knowing about God, there is a sense in which we just have to let God speak. If he's God, if he is bigger, grander, more powerful than us, which I imagine is a part of most people's definition of God, then it's more likely that he's going to come find us than we find him, because he is the bigger one. So I think that's an important point to note in how we answer questions like that. I do think there's probably a few things from the Christian story which help us think that, yeah, this could be possible. This sort of makes sense within the rest of what the Christian message says. So in terms of who people are, of who humanity is, it says that humanity, right at the start of the scriptures, is created in the image of God. So there is some connection and likeness between humanity and the divine. So I think that makes it easier then, in some way, for God to enter into humanity. And the other thing, what we're celebrating at Christmas is the birth of Jesus. So that the way that God entered into humanity was through a physical birth at the start of human life. And I think that again makes it more believable of how God could become man, because if God sort of entered into my life now, aged 40, whatever I am, or something like that, then you'd have this mixing of people, this mixing of personalities. Whereas if God enters in at the start of a human life in the person of Jesus, then you can have God, the person of God, taking on a different form. He's not changing personality by joining himself to an existing human being, but he's starting off. So I think some of those parts of the story help us make a bit of sense of it, but there's a mystery there. But maybe there's other people have the full answer to that one. So, but thank you, Gladys.
Nothing like throwing you into the deep end, Fraser. Anyone else want to have an attempt at that one? Otherwise, I can move swiftly on, have a few more questions. Okay, let's have a look here. Okay, what guidance did Jesus actually give for life? Who would like to have a look at that one?
I might start on that one, because I know it's something I did mention in the talk, really just making that point that because Jesus lived a human life, and then he taught, having lived that life himself, so he taught I guess not as people say in church that, from 6 foot above, but actually having lived it, it was more helpful, practical teaching. And, Jesus gave teaching on say money, the danger of money, that money can come and have power over you, because if you set your heart on something, it begins to dictate what you do and how you live. And Jesus talked about that, and then he talked about giving money away, and how that would be something that would break the power, because you're making money less important to your life. I think gave great advice about relationships, about marriage, but about friendships, about what love is, about putting the other person first, about resolving conflict, about forgiving people, and the importance of that, because no one's going to have a relationship where everything runs smoothly. So for any relationship to last, you have to work through conflict, or else it's not going to happen. And so he gave advice on that, and obviously modeled forgiveness and gave us forgiveness himself. So I think there's a whole range of real life things there, and a lot of the things that even in today's world people still value and rate as good teaching and good life principles come from Jesus, the Sermon on the Mount, and love your enemies, treat others as you wish they treated you. They're things that are still talked about, and maybe with different language today.
Thanks, Fraser. Does anyone else want to add anything to that?
Gladys, if I could say, I said what that comes to mind when Fraser was speaking was lived experience, because Jesus came into the world and was part of the world and lived and saw every element. He had the experience, so he gave guidance based on lived. There's something they say, nothing beats lived experience. And Jesus gave those advice based on his own experience here. So putting himself in the shoes of the life that we as human would live, nothing beats that.
Thanks, Helen. Alan, do you want to add anything to that? There's no pressure, because we can move on if not.
Just for me personally, I think, and I just as Fraser and Helen was speaking, the key thing that came to my mind was how, from my own life, how I look at how Jesus gave a guidance on how to live, and that is when I read the Bible. And for me, it is like, if I had a car and that was broken, I would take it to different mechanics, and if nobody could solve it, I would take it to the company that it originally produced it. And for me, that is what God does for me. That is what the Bible does for me. It is the user manual that I feel of how to live, how to operate.
Thanks for that, guys. Okay, I've got another question here. 2021 years is a long time ago. Is the Christmas story still really relevant in our internet age? Okay, I'll throw that open.
My answer is going to be yes anyway. I think it's relevant, and probably for the reasons that we've said. Life is certainly very different, and technology is always changing and moving on, and so what things look like, is different. And the world that I live in now, at a home office, which I guess more people have these days, post-COVID, is very different from probably a one-room house and a feeding trough that Jesus was born into. Very, very different as things have developed. But I think the things of life, the struggles of life, are still there. Loneliness, shame, feeling inadequate, those personal things to community and relationships, and the need for that, and how does that actually function? How do you, we live in a more divided world. There's pro and anti everything at the moment, from, obviously we see it in election time in politics, but see it in all sorts of things. And how do you actually stay together, glue together society, or form friendships with people who have very different views or come from very different backgrounds? And I think all those things that Jesus sort of went through, in his closest 12 disciples, he had a zealot, and he had a Roman tax collector, so the oppressed and the oppressor in the same band. So I think those underlying things of humanity are still the same, and the human condition is still largely the same, and therefore what Jesus offers is still relevant.
Thanks, Fraser. Alan or Helen, would you like to add anything? Just want to give you that chance. Otherwise, I can move on. Got a lovely question lining up here. What should Christians do about Santa? Now, there's an interesting one. Sorry, Alan, did you want to say something?
For me personally, when I think about Santa Claus and Christmas trees, it's a part of, like as a Christmas tree, I mean, you celebrate with different things, and you celebrate over food and drinks, but you do different things for celebration. But as a Christian, it is the season, but as I was saying earlier, Jesus is the reason, and Jesus should be the reason, should be the center of our celebration, of the season. Nothing should replace that. For me, nothing should fade that thing away from me. Nothing should remove Jesus and the reason he came for us. Irrespective, like different ways I celebrate, but nothing should replace or diminish the value of Jesus and the reason he came for us and the hope that he brings for me.
Thanks, Alan. I mean, I'm a parent, so I am hoping that a certain someone will pay a visit in whatever, less than 3 weeks' time, and planning operations are underway to ensure that happens. I think the positive side of Santa, is that it puts a bit of wonder, into Christmas, which is really important. Obviously it's for children. It puts that wonder in, and it does so with a message of receiving gifts, which are, sort of inexplicable. They're gifts that are freely given. I know there's a few old Christmas songs about, being naughty or nice, and there's the odd temptation as a parent to sort of use that. But by and large, it is sort of inexplicable. It's just a gift of grace, a gift given because the giver is generous. So I think that is a nice sort of symmetry to the Christian message as well that comes with Santa. So yeah, don't know if that answers the question, but there you go.
Thanks for that, Fraser. Okay, we can move on to another question. I think this is actually linked. Have Christians always celebrated Christmas? If not, when did that begin and why? Well, that's a bit of an interesting question there. Who would like to attempt an answer? This is where I'm glad I'm the MC, not on the panel.
I couldn't give you the full history of sort of date and time as to when it came in. I think what we maybe can pick up is that Easter was maybe celebrated very early, because what was the Sabbath for the Jewish people was from Friday evening through to Saturday evening, so primarily Saturday. But then the day of worship switched to Sunday, because that was the day Jesus rose from the dead, and that happened very early. So I think there was that sense in the very early followers of Jesus, early church, in which Easter was very important. And I'm sure, I don't know when in time then that Christmas followed that pattern. So I'll have to, but would have been a matter of time, I imagine. So.
Thanks, Fraser, for attempting that. Ellen or Helen, do you want to add to that?
Just to say, I agree with Fraser.
Good answer there, Helen. Good answer. Okay, now there is another question here. I think it's been part answered, but I'll ask it anyway, as it was sent in. Why do you think God came as a baby and not as an adult? And was that risky? Who would like to attempt that one? Okay, Alan.
For me, if I think about it, firstly, for me, just the way I think, I thank God that he came as a baby. And the reason being, Jesus came as a baby, God came as a baby, and he went through every stage of human life that I can face, that I go through. And that helps me to know that Jesus went. So if I'm looking for some answers, I would like to go to a person who has experienced the same thing. So for me, if God came as an adult or just remained a baby, that wouldn't have comforted me. Like today, if I face something and I go and if I want to pray, I know I'm looking at somebody who has lived what I am living, who has experienced something that I'm experiencing.
Yeah, I think that's really good, Alan. And we did mention one of the earlier answers, I think, that it sort of makes sense of how God could become man, in that sense that God entered in right at the start of the human life. So there was no sort of mixing of an existing personality. If God became as an adult human being, a man or a woman, there would then have been this mixing, which would have been difficult maybe. I think the other thing that always amazes me, just personally, around the baby bit, and I guess I get more out of this after I became a parent myself, is just the helplessness of babies. That there's nothing really they can do. There's so much has to be done for them. And it just makes you wonder at the fact that God entered into that state. And a creator God created the universe, all these things, to enter into that state of helplessness, of weakness, of dependence. We still value independence very highly in our culture, and for God to become dependent, which truly we all are in some way, I think is quite significant.
Thank you for that, Alan and Fraser. Okay, probably got time for one more question here. How can we actually have a relationship with Jesus today if he has returned to heaven? It's a good question there. So who would like to start us with that?
I think what I take from that question, during the talk, we mentioned how it helps us have Jesus actually being God becoming a human being means we can have a proper relationship, because it's actually a relationship with a human being who knows life. And that's come out in a few of our different answers in conversation. So that helps. I'm guessing the crux of this question is the fact that Jesus is now returned back to heaven and isn't on earth at present. But yet Jesus returned to heaven as a human being, so he still is embodied as a person. And as he left, he left his Holy Spirit on earth. So his own spirit is here, which then, becomes a connection point, I guess, between us and God. And the message of the faith is that people who become a Christian, make a decision to follow Jesus, have that spirit living within them. And so then they have that channel to be able to relate to God through the Spirit. And I think maybe one of the reasons that fits is that when Jesus went back to heaven, when Jesus was on earth physically, that relationship, which is modeled with the disciples, eating, drinking, talking, walking, is only ever with a limited number of people, because he's in one place. When he's physical, he's in one place. He was in first century Palestine, and he had the 12 disciples, or he had a crowd, maybe of 5,000, but still limited. Whereas now, when Jesus is back in heaven and his spirit is here, he sort of universalized the presence of God beyond geographical boundaries.
Thanks for that, Fraser. Anyone else want to add to that? Alan.
Just to add on what Fraser was saying, as Fraser was saying, God sending a spirit here that we can experience. And yes, we have this mortal body, but there's a spirit inside me, and the way I look at it and how I connect with God. My spirit, yes, there's this physical body of me, but there's a spirit within me, and that has its own personality, and that connects to the Spirit of God. And I enjoy that as having that relationship within my heart with God. Something I know that, yes, maybe I cannot see, but I know that God is close to me in my heart, and that I have his peace in me.
Thank you, Alan, for that. Okay, we're going to finish there now. Okay, so what I want to say is thank you to all of you who have been involved, for sharing stories and for being willing to and brave enough to be on the panel and answer some of these questions. And thank you to each of you who've joined us and for taking part through your questions and your comments. We will be running another webinar in this series, but no date or topic has been decided yet. So if you would like to get updates on this or anything else, all you have to do is just like our Facebook page, just follow the links there. So again, finally, thank you for joining us. Please continue to take care of yourselves and stay safe as you enjoy the season's festivities. And I hope tonight has given you food for thought, that there is more to Christmas than just Santa and presents and having a great time. Okay, good night, everyone. See you again soon.